But it was interesting. I'll tell you what also was interesting, the difference in the dialect from Pandy to Longtown. You go to Pandy and they were really quite Welsh. You go to Longtown and they were really English Hereforddians, you know. And they got a new language, really. They would talk about things like the ship. They wouldn't call them sheep. I am sin the sheep, the ship. I'm sin the ship today. And things like that was quite interesting. Another word they used to use, I can always remember, they said they hadn't been muck spreading, they'd been muck spreading. And that was the Longtown Llanfeino word. It was quite amusing, really.
Yeah.
And interesting. But also, I think the one thing I would remember about the Longtown and the Golden Valley, actually, was the great way they had of describing things and situations in, what would we say now, somebody who wasn't very well. And if you said to somebody from Llanfeino district, if you like, if you said to them, how is old Jim today? They would probably say, not very well, which means he probably got about a week to live.
Yes.
And they were masters of the understatement. And if they said, the most likely answer would be, if you said, how is Jim this morning, they'd say, pretty middling, which meant that the end was in sight. And I think that's so interesting. I remember also somebody saying to a garage proprietor up in that area, who shall be nameless, said to him how that old David had had a bump with his car. Well, this car was smashed all beyond repair. And so I said to this garage fellow one day, was the car hurt much? And he said, well, he got a few sharpish old crinkles in it. And the car was, to me, it was a total wreck. But I thought it was so funny, really. But one of the funniest stories I ever heard in the area was a chap who decided to do a bit of rallying. And he went and in the Forest of Dean rally. And he had a tremendous accident. And he wasn't hurt. And I saw him the next day in our garage looking for some bits and pieces and some means of resurrecting this car or pulling it out from the forest down there. And I said to him, you had quite an accident yesterday, didn't you? He said, oh, I did. I said, you were lucky you weren't hurt when you were he was, he said. I said, did you do much damage to the car? He said, I don't know, I haven't found him yet. I thought, you couldn't get a bigger accident than that, could you? You haven't managed to find him yet. But of course he was only teasing, but that's just the sort of thing you'd expect from that part of the world. Another thing I can remember about Longtown was a chappie going from the Prudential Insurance to talk to a farmer about life insurance. And he said, and he was asking, he said, I've got to ask you some quite pertinent questions. He said, about your ancestors. He said, I'm sure you'll understand the reason why. We wanted to have some sort of record of your family's illnesses and that sort of thing, so that we can give you the best possible deal. And he said to him, what did your father die? No, he said, what did your mother die from? And he said, she was quite old. He said, oh yes, how old? Well, I don't know, but she's getting on. She said, well, she died with childbirth, well, having a child. And he said, well, I say, what about your father? And he was trying to be clever to keep the price as low as possible, of course. And he said, well, he wasn't very old when he died either. And he said, oh yes, how old was he? And he said, oh, you're 64. He was old, wasn't he? He said, well, I suppose. So what did he die from? He said, I don't know, but it wasn't nothing serious. I thought, a lovely answer, that one. But there again, we were being cost conscious, you see. Yeah.
The farmers are always cost conscious, aren't they?
Oh, well, farmers, I remember a farmer saying to me once about I was miles away from here, and he said, what do you do for a living, Urban? And I said, well, we sell tractors and trailers and things. And he said, yes, he said, how do you get on with these old farmers? And I said, well, not very good, we don't get a very good living. He said, are you saying the farmers are mean? I said, oh no, we don't say mean. I said, we say cost conscious, they don't sound so bad. And he said, well, you know, I believe they're like this all over the world, you know. He said, I was looking in the Elephant Times only last week, he said, and I saw in there a second-hand farmer's suit for sale. And it said, very slightly used, but the pockets like new. He said he obviously, he didn't use his pockets much. And I thought that was quite amusing.
No.
So there we are.
No, any sort of local stories of the area?
That's right.
This bush.
Oh yes, I remember when I was a boy about the Holy Thorn, people coming up home. The Holy Thorn at the great tournament, and they'd go waiting at night when I was a kiddie. And the father'd go across and with him and to see the Holy Thorn come out on the 12th day of Christmas. I never went, but they told me he never went or two without. I've told me since that they had been there, and when he come out, he never come out in full blossom, but they had heard him crack and he come out in bed. And that is, there was a snow or a frost on the ground.
Now what about Sarah? Your grandparents used to tell you about Sarah up at Longtown?
Yeah,
Great grandparents?
Sarah Morris lived in Sarah Morris on the Turnpike House at the top of the bridge. They tell me about how Sarah, she used to add a rope across the road, and she took penny or tuppence for anybody who was around. The local farmers paid by the year, I think. I don't know why it was, but I have dug that garden for 8 years, and it was me who pulled that house down in 1936.
And a similar chap, and the same fellow, I should think, he went down to this farm one day in a car, another smartly dressed man, and he said to this farmer, he said, what's your name? He said, my name's Harry, what's yours? So he told him, and he said, can I get down to the brook here? And he said, what do you want to go down there for? He said, I'm going down there fishing. He said, you come down the wrong road. He said, you want to go on down and then turn right on down the road a bit, and you get down to the brook then. Oh, I see. Well, Harry, he said, you got a lovely view from here. Harry said, I suppose it is a good view, but you can't live off the view. He said, but you've got a job to see the mountains. He said, there's a bit mist about. He said, it is. He said, is it right that they used to say when you couldn't see the mountain it was going to rain? Harry said, that's what my mother used to say. And he said to him, what happens when you can't see the mountain? Harry said, it's mostly raining.
It's going to rain.
And then he said to him, well, he said, you live in a nice place, but haven't you got a long lane down to your farm? Harry said, if it had been any shorter, I wouldn't reach. So he didn't ask him no more questions. But there you are. It's interesting. Eh?
Well, that's right.
But these are the sort of people that were so funny, but rather hostile in a way towards city people. It was a shame, and I don't know whether perhaps they were like that to any strangers. I don't know. But once you got to know them, they were very friendly people, really. Wouldn't give you anything. They wouldn't give you £1, but they'd give you 2 quid worth of grub.
Well,
You know, especially if you went to work there like I did with the tractors and machinery and that, you know. Very interesting people.
and they're very trusting in some
Oh
ways.
yes, and you'd be
Rhythms.
part of the family almost in no time, you know.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.